Everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. We're going to spend a little time with Assistant District Attorney, Mr. Chris Ernie. We're talking about a cold case that goes all the way back to 1998 that was recently solved, and really a lot of stuff that goes into this case. So, Chris, thanks so much for being with us, man.
Well, thanks for having me.
Real interesting as you start reading about this. It goes back, like I said, to last century, right? 98. But
Right. That's exactly right.
But cold case, and it really gives some people some closure who didn't know what happened to a loved one.
Yeah, and that's the hardest part about it is the family for 22 years, had no idea. They suspected, but they really didn't know and had nothing to hold their hat on as to what happened to their loved one, to their son, to their brother. Yeah, that was tough.
So let's tell me a little bit more about Stanley Briggs, and he is the I guess not the defendant anymore, so the perpetrator, and it goes all the way back to the killing of Shannon Harris.
Yeah, so in 1998, Shannon Harris, a complaint came in from his mother, Miss Bernadine Cunningham, that Shannon was nowhere to be found and a missing person. And it was a big investigation done by the Houma Police Department. I know Lonnie Lusco, who just recently retired, was one of the ones actively involved in that. And they would check in plane flights, they would check in all kind of stuff, and just could never find any information, chasing down every lead that they could. Nothing was panning out. There were a bunch of rumors on the street as to what happened with Shannon. Shannon was engaged with some people that he probably shouldn't have been, including Stanley Briggs. I think he was some on and on living with Stanley on Main Street, near downtown Main Street. So that's essentially how it started. And fast forward a couple years, they get a lead from a guy who supposedly was involved in the burial of the body after he had been killed, and come to find out, Dana Coleman at that time was a detective on it, along with Lonnie and others. And there was actually a mass excavation of property off of Hollywood Road that this witness led them to. Joe Yates was involved in that. The parish was involved in that. It was some property owned by the Dewey family, Teddy Dewey's family, back in 2002. And one of the things is that the property had changed from 1998. It was all woods at that time. And this was on the corner of 9th Street and Hollywood Road, right by Saxony.
Mm-hmm.
And from 1998 to 2002, it had been cleared. It was from a heavily wooded area to basically cleared with just a few trees. So it changed. It looked different, and there was a mass excavation done. Pretty expensive to do that with contractors and whatever, and they would just unfortunately could not find a body. They believed they were on the right track at the time, and of course the family was hopeful and disappointed when nothing was found and it was terminated. Dana Coleman was really very upset and still kept trying to. He would never give up on this case, as any of them would. They had a couple of leads over the years. I think sometime in 2007, they tried to maybe get some DNA from or check for blood at the location. So, but nothing ever panned out. It didn't have a body, so it was hard to do anything.
It was missing persons, basically, until you find a body.
Until it was a homicide, right? It wasn't yet classified as a homicide. Fast forward 2020. In the middle of COVID, the police get a call, disturbance somewhere on Stovall Street, man running around naked, apparently high on drugs. So they respond, and just so happened that in addition to the normal patrol, detectives Rory Olds and Joe Lodry, who were working some grant trying to help, also went to back up the officers just to, because they were there and available to go. And so they're there, and when they arrive, Stanley Briggs is there, and they had known who Stanley was. He had some run-ins here and there. Everybody knew who Stanley was. And he was there and he had a towel around him at the time. And eventually they got him to put some clothes on, and he was clearly under the influence of some narcotics, probably methamphetamine that he had ingested earlier, some kind of way. So Stanley is compliant. They call ambulance to bring him to Chabert Hospital. While they're waiting, and he eventually gets some clothes on, he pulls out his phone out of his pocket. He puts it on the video app and hands it to Detective Olds and looks in the camera and says, my name is Stanley Briggs, and I killed a man. And his name is Shannon Harris. And so the police are like, okay, and ask him a few questions about that and give him his phone back. And they went there for a welfare check. They had no idea that this was going to be part of an investigation in a murder case, a homicide case. So fast forward, after the ambulance takes Stanley to the Chabert, Joe and Lodrig and Rory go back to the police station. They discuss it with Travis Terrio, who's now the chief. At the time, he was chief of detectives. Also with Dana Coleman, who was the chief at the time. And of course, they all knew about the Shannon Harris missing person case. They were very involved in it, at least Dana was at the time, So they said, well, go to Chabert and get a formal statement from him. So a couple hours later, they go to Chabert. They formally interview Stanley on the record, read him his rights, do that. He's still cooperative. He understands what's going on. And yeah, he confirmed what he had said earlier, gives a little more details about how it happened. He shot him in the head. And then they said, okay. So after that, he was still being treated medically. So eventually Chabert had him transferred to behavioral health in Vermilion Parish facility.
Can I stop you right
Yes.
there? It's an interesting story, which brings in some LSU forensic people too. So
Absolutely.
Let's take a break. We'll be right back and continue with the
Thank you.
story. Thanks, Chris. We'll be right back. We'll buy you time after this.
Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.
Hey, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. We're spending some time with Assistant District Attorney, Mr. Chris Ernie. And we were talking about the Shannon Briggs murder trial that you got a second degree conviction.
Stanley.
I'm sorry. Stanley Briggs.
Stanley Briggs.
We don't want to convict the wrong person.
No.
And you just got a conviction on that. You were saying here he had been picked up years later, and then he was then transported to a behavioral clinic around Abbeville in Vermilion Parish.
Correct. In Vermilion Parish, Vermilion Behavioral Health Center in near Abbeville. So several days later, he's completely sober. He's being treated over there, and detectives Lodrig and Rory Oates, again, same two that initially found him, set up a video interview with him. Formal interview. It lasts about an hour. And started going through the same thing again. It took a while because he was understanding now what he had said and that he's implicating himself. He's tried to somewhat backtrack or crawfish a little bit, but eventually came clean and indicated the whole story as to what happened, how he had executed supposedly for a hit for money to be paid, and he said it was never paid by a gentleman by the name of Chris Diggs, who's long been deceased as well. So that's what it was about. And, it was drugs, money, story, and that Chris wanted Shannon dead. And Stanley was supposed to get money to do it, and he did it.
I got you. And he actually ended up helping you.
And he did. So after that, and he said he would be helpful to find a body. So they go ahead and get the warrant, arrest him, and then at some point transport him back. They set up the excavation again, attempted excavation, because it's the same spot is what Stanley's saying now, that 20 years prior in 2002, or 18 years prior in 2002, where they tried to excavate before from information from another witness. So they knew they were on the right track. Everything it's matching up to. They just got to go find the body. So they started the excavation, and it's a very detailed, slow process, because if you don't want to mess up the body, if you're using heavy equipment, you have to use heavy equipment. And so they do this, and it took a while, but then they found some pieces of bone. called the LSU anthropology department. They're called the FACES lab, FACES. And they're extremely professional, excellent at what they do. And they confirmed this is human bone, and they said, we're coming. They came down with a team. They were here in 2 hours, and they completed the excavation in a professional, looks like archaeologists, what they would do. And they were able to piece it together. They had the skull. Joe Lodrig was actually in the dirt, in the mud with them, and is actually the one who found Shannon Harris's skull. And it had a bullet hole right here.
So executed.
And it was definitely executed. And he was shot while sleeping. That was the story. That's what Stanley said, and everything was confirmed to that. So the anthropology people, they get the body, they bring it back to Baton Rouge, and they do what they're supposed to do, clean it up, and then they send a tooth off for DNA matching, and they had DNA from the mother, and it definitely matched up. And everybody testified at trial. The anthropology people, the DNA specialist from the State Police Crime Lab came in, and of course Joe Lodrig was the one who, our investigator in the case.
But the trial, we throw in a hurricane and COVID, right?
Yeah, well, in a murder or homicide case, you're going to have more delays probably than most cases in a normal circumstance. And when you throw COVID in, and this is the height of COVID, and then when you throw in a hurricane, which knocks out our jail and knocks out our courthouse and other things for a period of time, it just makes everything backlogged. Yeah, it was difficult.
Well, will his cooperation help him out at all?
Well, unfortunately, no. I say unfortunately. I think the reason this case got solved is because he still had some shred of humanity in him. And he cooperated, and it was obviously his guilt was getting to him over the years, and that's what made him just come out and admit to this. And although he didn't plead guilty, I mean, this was a murder case. There was no incentive for him to do so. It's a mandatory life sentence.
Right.
So, he knew what was going to happen. He knew that he made us do our jobs. He had admitted it. We had his confessions, and the jury took short order to go ahead and convict him.
What a great example of teamwork, though, right? Because you get a bunch of different departments
and
coming
not
together,
quitting,
right?
and not quitting. I mean, this was the cops are dedicated, man. They just they hate to not be able to solve a case, and sometimes it happens. You just don't have the evidence, I mean, for the most part, we have very good police officers and detectives here at the sheriff's office and police department, and state police as well. And they do a good job. It's a hard job,
Right.
It's back to Stanley. He showed them where the body was buried. He actually went out there and said it's in this area. And sure enough, when they started, because they had dug in one area, didn't find anything. And he told me you got to go
50 feet
over a little bit more, and so they went over a little bit more, and that's where they started finding the bones.
But interesting to bring in forensic anthropology, criminal computer enhancement service out of Baton Rouge. So
right.
All that coming together, to a good case, but to solve a case, that's been, like I say, for loved ones and the family.
That's who you feel the best for is Miss Cunningham. She and other family members, his sister, their family, and they were so grateful to the police and to our office. But I mean, we did what we felt we had to do, and they were satisfied. They were grateful when the body was found, and then this basically put the end to it.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, great, interesting story, and we appreciate y'all your hard work.
Thank you, Harry.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Chris Ernie with the District Attorney's Office. We'll be right back with more Bayou Time after this.